That's the weirdest football game I've ever seen. The first 3.5 quarters are a fairly normal, bad football game. I've covered a lot of games like that, especially in that stadium. Jay Gruden era, just terrible both ways. Two teams, neither of which deserve to win. Just playing football nonsense back and forth. And eventually someone has more points at the end, in my experience, because of the time frame that I covered the team. Mostly it was the visitor. And then the last 5 minutes of that game, Jayden puts together a beautiful 2-minute drive. It looks like they're just going to steal the game. Obviously, the biggest steal comes off the Terry thing, and then all of a sudden, Seibert misses the kick. And there's just so much to chew on in so many facets of this game. But before we dive into specifically the offense to get started, we must simply acknowledge that is the weirdest football game I've ever seen in my life. And I was on the Washington football beat from 2015 to 2019 and have been covering the team from the studio side since 2020. It's a weird-ass football game.
Number 2.
All right, let's talk about the offense. I'll tell you, I just got done watching the tape of the offense, and on tape, it is not as bad as it felt in real time in terms of a down-in, down-out execution. That's the good news. The bad news is it was even more frustrating because they actually did some good stuff in this game, and then they just kept finding a way to get in their own way and shoot themselves in the foot. And that is something that you actually see quite a lot of in the NFL from bad offenses. And that is kind of an actually more alarming thing than they just had a bad day, snap in, snap out. Like, a lot of offenses in the NFL are offenses that can string together a couple of plays and then you just know they're going to get in their own way. And we've actually talked about that quite a lot this year because on the early portion of the season, the Commanders had this luxury of not being one of those teams, while defensively, they could play a style that relied on the fact that a lot of the NFL is. A lot of the NFL, the Titans, who are going to be here next week, are like the ultimate version of this, where, they're probably going to make some plays. Down in, down out, they're actually will move the football in some decent chunks even. And then Will Levis will do one of the craziest quarterback things you'll ever see, or they'll take a sack or 6 sacks, or yesterday they actually took 8 sacks, and they will not ultimately be able to put up the points they need to win. They did yesterday against Houston, but by and large, that's how their season has gone. The Cowboys are kind of the same way. Eventually, they'll do something to screw it up. And the Commanders have become that team. They've become a team that eventually will, at the very least, not finish drives in the red zone, but will probably find a way to screw it up. Whether it is in this game, they're driving a little bit, they get going, they're like 5-6 plays into a drive. And by the way, all these drives have a tremendous starting field position, but they're 5-6 plays into a drive, and Tyler Biadasz snaps it on one, and clearly the snap count was at least 2 because he's about the only guy that moves. And then Jayden just has to wind up taking a sack. It's only a -1, but you've now gone from, I believe it was like a 1st and 10 or a 2nd and 10 to, or a 2nd and 6 to 3rd and 7. And you go from hey, 2nd and 6, we're okay. We just get 2-3 yards on a run, it's 3rd and 3. That's where you want to live. Now it's 3rd and 7. You're in a bad spot. They get intercepted on a freaking screen pass in the red zone. You're on the 22-yard line, so fringe red, one of Kliff's favorite spots to call a screen. And that getting intercepted is on Brian Robinson. And I know that Jayden probably could dirt that, but if you freeze frame it, or you look at it frame by frame, if B-Rob can get to a place where he, if B-Rob can get to that ball and Jayden kind of leads him, and it's not a great throw, it's a little hard for my liking. Jayden's trying to elude pressure and he just fires it in there. And if he can loft it out a little bit more, Brian can run under it, get around the block, and maybe something's happening. But either way, just don't bobble it up in the air into the other dude's arms. There's no way that should be picked. And it is. And they go from at least a field goal if Jayden throws it in the dirt to whatever that was. The 8:11 left in the game. They give up the touchdown to Schoonmaker. They come out. They need to get going. And actually, sorry, they give up, the touchdown to Schoonmaker. It's 13-9. They need to get going, and lo and behold, John Bates fumbles. That play design is fantastic. It's a tendency breaker. They do it on a lot of running on first down. Eckler's in there. It looks like they're going to toss it out to him, and they pull the whole defense one way. Bates runs against the grain. Jayden hits him in stride. Easy throw, easy catch. Phenomenal job by Kliff manufacturing something easy. Great job by Jayden to deliver a ball with anticipation on time, in stride, and Bates just gets the ball knocked out. And it's that kind of stuff all the time that just absolutely kills you in this football game. Which gets us to
number 3.
The offense in general right now looks a lot like LSU's offense in a way that concerned us before the draft with like kind of what would Jayden Daniels be as a pro. And a lot of those concerns were alleviated early in the season because he did a great job of attacking the middle of the field, throwing with great anticipation, tight windows. He was unbelievably accurate in some of these spots. And then lo and behold, he regresses a little bit to the mean. You have this, this kind of game where he's just throwing a bunch of hitches and goes. And you can't win in the NFL that way. It's just too hard to live on one-on-one matchups on the outside. And it's not necessarily the play calls. It's the quarterback's decision-making to say, hey, I've got these matchups. I'm going to pick the ones on the outside versus letting, a guy like Zach Ertz get open over the middle and hitting him there or, hitting a dig later on in the down. I'm just going to take the hitch here. Like, I'm going to read this side of the field where we have a one-on-one matchup versus the 3-receiver side, which is a little bit more complex, but maybe offers us a higher ceiling because we can get a guy that breaks free and breaks open. And so unless these are predetermined and Kliff is saying, hey, we're doing this, it doesn't matter what's happening on the 3-receiver side, just take the one-on-one, this is a quarterback-driven thing, not necessarily a play caller-driven thing. You have to find those spaces in the middle of the field, and I know Jayden can do it because he did it earlier this year. And by the way, late in this football game, that 2-minute drive with 5 minutes to go, he's ripping footballs all over the place. Digs, comebacks over the middle. Like, as the game went and he kind of had to have it, there's a play that he runs, or a throw that he makes on a play that I love in Madden all the time. In Madden, it's called play action comebacks, and they run it. They get to it a little bit differently. They run it out of an pistol formation, and it's just a quick token fake. But you have tight splits, and then Terry and Noah run deep down the field. Looks like they're pushing vertical, and they just stop. And you have to throw that ball with great anticipation while it still looks like it's going to be vertical and trust that your receiver is going to stop exactly where he's supposed to, turn around, and have the ball hit him in the chest. And he hits Noah on one of those, and it's how they get out of, on that big long drive, it's how they get out of the 1st and 20 after the Senate hold, was they run that play. And it's he can do it. He's got to do it more often. He's got to do it earlier in the game. And if you want to put that on the coaches to say they've got to coach that up and emphasize that, fine, but ultimately it's got to be on the quarterback to do it.
Number 4.
Which leads me to something that probably a lot of you, I know how this works. You're going to be mad at, but it is what it is, so I'm not going to just pre-fight the fight and yell at people who are going to yell in the comment section. But on the list of problems, I don't have Kliff Kingsbury probably as high as many of you do. If you're Kliff, I don't know necessarily what you call to feel really confident in right now, which is a really rough spot as a play caller. Because when you get picked off on a screen, you're going to call another one? Like, you don't feel good about that. It's a kind of supposed to be a low risk, potentially high reward play, and you have had nothing but bad plays off of it for weeks on end. I'm not calling that. Okay, so that's out. How else have we gotten easy yardage? Let's run the football. Well, we got some guys on our line that are struggling a little bit right now to nail their blocks. And especially once Andrew Wiley gets out, like, oh boy, we got a running game. No B-Rob and Trent Scott's blocking instead of Andrew Wiley. I don't know that I feel good calling a lot of the runs that were successful for us earlier in the year. All right, well, let's go quick game over the middle. Jayden doesn't really seem to want to throw a lot of that. He's wanting to throw to the outside. And so it becomes a lot of these hitches and goes. And if I have any real critique for Kliff, it would be kind of two things. One, you got to find something in the run game. And I don't care if it's calling these game plan runs, these kind of trick handoff delays, but even those were going for like 3 yards. But you just got to keep searching. And in this game, they went a lot of 13 personnel, and I think they probably could have tried to spread some things out and get some runs out of some different formations. There was a lot of zone read in this game. I'll have a better sense of that after I talk through it with Logan tomorrow on Take Command. But I just feel like there's been ways for them to find something in the run game pretty much all year, and I don't feel like they did yesterday. And it's also hard because you have offensive line and running back changes in the game. So there's a lot of, maybe you find something and then Wiley goes out and then you're like, oh crap, we can't do that anymore. So it's tough gig. And then the other one is going to sound just backwards from what a lot of people I think came out of this game thinking, which is, oh, he didn't throw enough deep shots, not aggressive enough. He was actually too aggressive at times in this game. They were really trying to find big plays down the field. And I think at times, especially considering how good the field position was, like, just take what the defense gives you. And that's hard because Dallas did mix up their coverages quite a bit. There is some there's some cover 2 stuff where it's like, okay, what they're giving us was the underneath stuff. Well, now they're in cover 2, which is designed to take that away. Okay, well, now let's go back to the deep stuff. And so Dallas did a good job and called a good defensive game. But, finding ways to maybe, whether it's sending Jayden in the line with 2 plays or giving some of the audible control, whatever it is, like, you got to be able to take what the defense gives you. They were given some of the underneath stuff early. Like, Terry could have gotten a lot more looks early. Hey, we're calling the double hitches here. Like, look to Terry's side. And so some of this is just getting McLaurin more involved early. But it really is a thing where the execution of the plays, the routes actually being run, the balls being thrown, the decisions being made that just catch the ball. Like, that stuff is a bigger problem. The blocks being executed. They face a ton of pressure in this game because Micah Parsons gave Nick Allegretti a hellish kind of day when they lined Parsons up over him, which was a good job by Dallas doing some stuff that they hadn't done a ton of earlier in the year. So that stuff to me is more emblematic of their problems than the play calls themselves, even though everyone just wants to yell at the play caller because that's what people do when we talk about football.